Hey everybody, welcome back for another video. Today we're going to be talking about land reclamation and the mud flood. Because as I've been looking into some of these early colonial period sites, both in North America and Australia, there's been some common elements that keep popping up, and one of those is after these early colonial periods, there's land reclamation that always seems to be involved, or at least a lot of times. So I'm just going to share some of that with you. And we can start with New Amsterdam, because New York City was once New Amsterdam, and we've seen some of the maps that look like this, and this is what the Dutch colony would have looked like, at least according to this map. But during excavations, they find, just ruins and remnants of that colony. This was an old Dutch tavern, and they find buried walls. This wall which belonged to that Dutch colony was 10 feet below Battery Park, and we're told that this was intentionally buried with landfill. And when you start looking into the history of New York's harbor, there's these buried ships they find as well, and the story behind it is it was intentionally buried as landfill once again. So it's just something that pops up with this site, and when you read into it, you find out that this period of increasing the amount of land started in the late 1790s, so after this Dutch period. So that's just something that's going to pop up. This land reclamation usually happens during or just after these early colonial periods. So let's go to Australia, and we're going to go down to Western Tasmania, this remote island referred to as Sarah Island in Macquarie Harbour. But this was one of those penal colonies. I believe it was one of the earliest. But when you start looking into land reclamation, the techniques employed in Australia and Britain in the 1800s, apparently those techniques that were employed for land reclamation are not well documented. Not surprising to me. But this particular island, Sarah Island, it lasted not too long, from 1822 to 1833. And it's full of ruins, fully and partially buried structures. And again, the speculation is that these structures are a lot older. We're just being told it was all built in the 1820s and 30s. But there was tourism going on at this site by 1900. So we had that. But this particular island, I guess the southern part of it was reclaimed land, according to the information we're given. In 1825, the southern end of Sarah Island was extended, but the precise extent of the reclaimed land is unknown at present. This is another site that's in ruins and also has this reclaimed land, which may have actually been caused during an event, maybe. But when you start looking at this place, it's just full of these ruins and looking much older than 1820s and partially buried. A lot of the structures just have these loose bricks all over, and these bricks, they look a lot, to me anyway, like some of the bricks that I've seen at Bennett's Bay in Sydney, Australia, on the mainland. But going back to that island, here's what some of these bricks look like. And you can see underneath the facade here, similar bricks. And when you go to Sydney, Australia, the buried blocks, the phenomenon that was rediscovered in 2017, they were finding these buried structures as well, and these similar bricks that were sitting underneath feet of clay. Not a great shot, but yeah, so just some similarities to note. So I just wanted to point out this was, we're told, a penal colony, and for some reason there was this land reclamation, but the site is in ruins. So I think this was older than we're being told. Now let's move over back to Port Arthur, which is on the other coast of Tasmania. And we looked at this in a previous video. You have this penitentiary, and this site as a whole looks a lot older than the 1800s and partially buried in places. But it turns out there was land reclamation here too, according to the official history. But we're given some of these older depictions of what the coastline used to look like. And this particular image, the description of it, a ship sits in the careening yard right here, in the careening yard beside the waterfront. workshops where the penitentiary is today. Okay, so they're telling us that the coastline was a little different in the 1800s, but today you have this entire area that we're told is all reclaimed. And I guess I'm wondering, maybe it was already here and something happened, and that's speculation. But the reason why I have that speculation is because this area that's adjacent to the penitentiary, that's where excavations found some interesting things. But salvage excavations on convict-built reclaimed land, the entire parade ground at Port Arthur was reclaimed. No details of the construction are given. Yeah, so this entire area, we're told, is reclaimed land. And I guess there were excavations digging into it, and it was a mixture of whole bricks, brick fragments, and dolerite rubble in loose sand and clay. So this clay turns up a lot. But this area over here, again, this was a subject of more recent excavations, and these are just a few archaeologists digging at the site of the penitentiary parade ground fountain. And by the way, this is the fountain here. But as I mentioned in a previous video, there were digs happening here, and they found a bunch of clay. And underneath the clay, they found these traces of this earlier industrial past. And they found this anvil, but it was upside down, sitting under clay. And this is just an image showing it right side up. So I guess what I'm wondering is, this whole narrative of reclamation of land, is it just a way to explain why you have all this extra sediment in these areas? Again, it's just something we're tracking. None of this is proof. But in 1831, they're kind of showing us a depiction of what they believe this area would have looked like. This area here, again, they're trying to give us an accurate depiction of what it would have looked like in 1831. And by 1856, it was quite the industrial site, but now it's buried underneath, these layers of clay. So I thought that was interesting, and I just wanted to mention that. So we've got these two convict sites, and there's all this land reclamation. These sites are partially buried in ruins, and I think they're a lot older than we're being told. But we got one more stop here as far as land reclamation, going back to North America, Charleston, South Carolina. And I've touched upon Charleston quite a bit, but underneath present-day Charleston was, again, this early colonial period. There was this walled city with these fortifications and walls, and they find traces of these fortifications and walls. And this was a particular dig where they were digging down to see how far this wall went. And this was day 13. It's hard to see here, but day 19, you had about 8.5 feet of wall that was all below grade. And according to the history, another 6 feet would have went above grade. So a lot of work went into getting rid of this site. Or was it a destructive event? Maybe. But when I started looking into this site, again, after this early colonial period, there's this land reclamation. And this lady, Christina Ray Butler, she wrote a book trying to detail all the land reclamation that happened. And I just got a few quotes. Pretty much everything that floods in this city today is the reclaimed areas that were done 200 years ago. And when you find out some of what we're told was used as fill, you'd be surprised. And so you might have a private owner using slaughterhouse remains and sand for fill, which happened all the time. And also, she mentions how there were scavengers that would collect all the garbage and refuse, and they would dump it in the low spot. So carcasses, all these other slaughterhouse remains, garbage, they're just whatever they can get their hands on to use it for this landfill, basically. Yeah, I thought that was interesting. So I guess I'm noticing this basic pattern with a lot of sites associated with the early colonial periods of these sites. They're in ruins, they're buried, either fully or partially, and there's this land reclamation that seems to be associated with a lot of these sites. So just really interesting stuff. And just what I want to mention real quick, going back to Tasmania, there was another one of these colonies for convicts, but it was for juveniles, and they're referred to as the Lost Boys of Point Pure. And it's just another one of these sites, and it's not far from Port Arthur. with the penitentiary, and you got a little golf course very close to it, but there's ruins here. And this is pretty much all that's left. Today, Point Pure is an archaeological site, and unfortunately, its buildings were demolished after it closed. So just like that first example on the western part of Tasmania, it's in ruins. This site's in ruins. Port Arthur's in ruins. Like, common themes. But there was a depiction showing before the site was demolished. You had these sketches that were made, but only a few sketches of the buildings were made before they were demolished. So I guess I questioned these sketches, and I think this site is a lot older, just like all the other sites. So I just wanted to bring this topic of land reclamation up. Is it a cover story for something else that happened, or is it terraforming, or who knows? But these sites are older in my opinion, and that's just kind of where I'm at with this. So I thought it was all interesting, and I think that's about all I got for you for today. Once again, big shout out to all the patrons. Really appreciate the support and the help. So thank you once again. So until next time, take care. Bye.